Hello Year 7s, we're going to do a little bit of revision on decimals to hopefully prepare you for what's ahead. I know we've done a little bit of decimals in fractions, well this unit's totally on decimals. We watch this and then hopefully you're a little bit better prepared for what we're going to do in class. So let's look at our first thing, is place value. Now place value is the fancy words we use in maths for the value of each digit. So you've learnt for a long time that this is 7 units or 7 ones, 7 tens, 7 hundreds and thousands, tens of thousands, so on and so on and so on. 10 of this makes 1 of that, 10 of that makes 1 of that, and so on. Well, it's the columns they're in, just like these numbers, that gives decimals its value. So let's have a look at our first one. 0.123. Now for most of the time I'm not going to bother with a number there. My main focus is on decimals. I've got one coming up soon that's got a whole number there, but you dealt with this sort of stuff from prep all the way through to grade 6. We need to get more focused on this side of the decimal point, which is our decimals. Now, these are in columns, like any numbers, and these columns give it its value. So, I've actually put up little headings here. 10 for tenths, not tens. This is tenths, the fraction of tenths. This is like 1/10. This is the hundredths column, this is the thousandths column, and of course then tens of thousandths, and so on and so on and so on. But we'll just stick with these three just for now. So, 1/10, 2 hundredths, 3 thousandths. We would read that as 0.123. Please don't say 0.123. It's not 123, that's a number. We have to say decimals as their digits, so please do that for me if you will. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Now here I have got a whole number. I've got the number 14, but that's a little bit irrelevant. In here we've got a 5 here, a 7 there, and a 4 there. You'd say 14.574. Oops, I brought up the next one. I thought I had the headings again, but I didn't. Just to remind you though, this here is the tenths, the hundredths, and the thousandths, and that is 574 thousandths is what that reads at. This one here, even if there's a 0 there, it doesn't matter. You still have to have the column of tenths, the column of hundredths, the column of thousandths. We've got no tenths, so we go 3 places back. So we're going to talk about thousandths. You'd read that as 53 thousandths and say it as 0.053. Okay, let's have a look at what we're going to do today. Rounding is an important one. Very, very often I've got students all the way up to years 10 and 11 who still cannot round decimals very well. And it costs them because in many questions we ask you to round to a certain number of decimal places, and if you don't do it, you tend to lose half a mark. So it's a skill you really need to get your head around and be very good at. Let's have a look first of all. 0.234. Now we're going to round this to 2 decimal places. What that means is I only want a digit there, a digit there. I do not want a digit here where I'm looking like I'm trying to rub that 4 out. I don't want anything there. Sometimes you get answers like 0.2341862 goes on and on. It just gets confusing. We tend to always round to 2 decimal places or whatever we're asked to. In this instance, 2 decimal places. So the 4 goes away and the answer is 0.234. Now, that's one instance. We're going to have a look at this again now a little bit differently. I've got almost the same one, except my third digit here is an 8. Now this time, I'm going to look at this digit and it's going to help me change the other ones here. In rounding, you've got the number of decimal places is 2, so you tend to look at the next digit to help you decide what happens. If the next digit is a large number, then we round up, in this case, to 0.24. Now what you've got to get used to here is if this third digit, or the important rounding digit, is a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, we stay down at these 2 numbers. We don't change them. If this digit here is 5, and I'll harp on 5 again later on, 6, 7, 8 or 9, then it's actually closer to go up to the next number. Now the next number means that this number here just goes up by 1. So 0.238 is actually closer to 0.24. If you wrote 0.23 because you just dropped off that letter, or that number, I'm sorry, it's not a letter. If you just dropped that off, you're actually wrong. It's closer to 0.24. In this instance, we are going to round to 1 decimal place. Now, I've specifically put a whole lot of decimals here, and I've specifically put a 5 there. I said I want 1 decimal place. So I want 0 point and 1 digit. It might be a 4 or it might be a 5. Well, the next number just here is a 5, and I just said before, when you've got a 5 there, you round up. So we will go this here up by 1 because 0.45 is actually closer to 0.5 than it is to 0.4. And these 3 digits here are actually a little bit irrelevant. This is the number I want to leave or change, so this is the only one that affects us, the one just next door. So 0.45123 rounded to 1 decimal place is 0.5. Last one on rounding, I want to round this to the nearest whole number. That means I want the 1 left there, or it might go up to a 2. There are only 2 chances, only 2 choices. Let's have a look at this. Well, the next digit along is in fact an 8. That means that we would round up. These 2 here are relevant to us. Next digit is an 8, we would round up. So 1.8 or 1.824 would round up to 2, the whole number of 2. Righto, what's next? Converting from fractions into decimals. Now, we did some of this when we did the fractions unit, but we need to do it again because it's an important skill that we need to know. So let's have a look. When we're going to get a fraction, I want you to change it to a decimal. It all comes back to the bottom number. Is the bottom number a 10 or 100 or 1,000 or so on? Because that decides the columns. Now, we've got no whole numbers, so it's going to be 0 point. Let's bring up the answer. It's actually 0.3. The reason being that this means tenths. And if you go back to our earlier little animation, we had the red bits up there, which I think I'm going to bring up now anyway. Yes, there they are. When we have them, this is the tenths column. That said tenths, so we put that digit in the tenths column. Nothing there, nothing there. If you wrote this, you're not wrong. It's still correct, we just don't bother. So we've got a 3 in the tenths column, 0 in the hundredths, 0 in the thousandths, 0.3 or 0.300. This is the preferred answer. You don't really need those zeros. Now, can I highlight again that it's the bottom number of the fraction that decides. Okay, if it's tenths, we go 1 column back. If it was a hundredths, we'd go 2 columns back. If it was thousands, we'd go 3 columns back. Now, no more little lovely animations up here. I think you get the idea of the columns. Let's look at this one. This is 27 hundredths. So clearly, it's going to be 0 point again, and we're going to go 2 columns back because it says hundredths. So we'll go back to here. So simply, we put the 0 point, and then we put the 2, 7 after that. 27 hundredths, 27 hundredths here, 0.27 there. Here's a tricky one. Oops, sorry, I've got to put that there again. So there we've got the tenths, the hundredths and the thousands, just highlighting that again. This one, 7 hundredths. If I gave this to you in a quiz to start the day, I reckon at least half of you would get wrong. You would write 0.7. Again, look at the bottom number. It's hundredths. So we have to go 2 places back. But we've only got 1 digit there. Well, put the 7 in the second column and fill up the first column with a 0. So 7 hundredths is actually 0.07. If you wrote 7 tenths, you've actually written, or 0.7, I'm sorry, if you wrote 0.7, you've actually written 7 tenths. And you should know that. So it's a mistake that you shouldn't make. Let's have a look at some harder ones. 4/5. Now this is a pretty easy harder one. This is where you have to bring your fractions into play again. 4/5 is actually 8 tenths. And just like I showed you before, that means one column back, so 0 point and an 8 in that column. That's an easy one. What about this one? 12 twentieths. Well, it's not over tenths or hundredths or thousands, so it's actually a little bit harder. Just like we can change that into a tenths equivalent fraction, we've got to change this into another equivalent fraction. Now, I would hope that in your brains by now you've gone, if I divide that by, if I multiply that by 5, okay, multiply it by 5, it becomes 100. So if I multiply that by 5, it should become 60. An equivalent fraction for 12 twentieths is 60 over 100. We've done this to death in quizzes and in our fractions unit. These two are worth the same amount, they just look differently. It's like a dollar coin and two 50-cent pieces. They look different, pardon me, but they're worth the same amount. So, first thing we do, like in this one as well, find an equivalent fraction that's over 10 or 100, and then it's pretty easy, 0.60 or 0.6, because we have to go 2 decimal places back, but when one of them is 0, you don't need to bother. So 60 hundredths or 0.60 or 0.6, either one is fine. This fellow is a little bit different. This is really hard to make into a decimal. I'm going to show you my special method of how to do it again. I did show you in the fractions unit. I'm going to show you again how to do that in class. It's too confusing to bother in this PowerPoint because I'm really, pardon me again, just trying to get the basics to the front part of your brain. It's in the back part of your brain at the moment. I'm trying to bring it forward into the front part before we can do this in class. So things like that are hard. We'll look at that next time. Let's go the other way. Here's a decimal. I want it as a fraction. Now, I know this is the most common one. I've asked you to memorize it since April this year, so you've probably already memorized it. That 0.5, let's go the slow way though, is actually 5 over 10. And if you gave that on a test, you'd probably get the right marks. You might lose half a mark unless you make it what we already knew already, that it's 1/2. So we're pretty particular on fractions in their lowest possible form. Those two are the same. This is just the simpler version of it. What about this one? 0.45. You should be noticing, hang on, I've gone back 2 decimal places, so it's going to be over the number 100. That's just a given, it has to be. 2 decimal places, so the bottom number of my fraction is 100. The top number is the actual decimal places, which is 45. So that is 45 over 100. I'm hoping right now in your brain you're realizing that both of these numbers divide evenly by 5. And if we do that, we can get this as well. Now, that's not as easy as the first one. That was an easy one. This one, however, still doable. They both divide by 5. 9 twentieths is the better answer, but 45 hundredths isn't too bad. What about this one? 0.13. Again, 2 decimal places, so we're talking hundredths. So we're talking bottom number 100 and the top number is 13 because that's what is there. I notice I haven't left any room over here, or not much room, because I'm going to try and simplify that, but I can't. Okay? Nothing goes evenly into 100 or 13. Don't say 1, you know I hate that, because 13 is a prime number. So that's as low as it can be. So 13 hundredths just stays as 13 hundredths. Now, hopefully that's pushed a little bit of this to the front of the brain for me, and we'll be able to move along a bit quicker in class. When you see me, come up and say this to me, and I'll know that that means you watch this PowerPoint, and I'll be very happy about that. See you in class.